Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, where we discuss leadership, our stories, challenges, and how we can be great, inclusive, and fabulous leaders. My name is Tara Lehman, and I'm a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services. For our leadership clients, I aim to provide effective leadership coaching, consulting, and workshops to help develop you, increase employee retention, and even improve that bottom line. You can see all the details and our new programs at amplifyingleadership.ca, a division of Twin Life Coaching and Business Services. Today, I am welcoming Steve Hornett, founder and CTO of Raging Warthog Technology Services. Welcome, Steve.
Hey Tara, how are you? By the way, I love that this is about leadership.
Oh, thank you. I love it too. It's a passion of mine. Okay,
Back at you.
Steve. So because I said raging warthogs, which I'm sure a lot of people say it that way, I know that my listeners are going to wonder, what the heck name is that? What is Raging Warthog Technology Services?
So it started a long time ago, and quite frankly, I invented it. A lot of tactical people start helping out friends, and if they're lucky, they start helping out the odd business. And it occurred to me early on that I should create a company, maybe in the future incorporate, which I've actually never done. But I wanted the name to be memorable,
Mhm.
I just invented the name. It jumped up at me one day, and I was lucky enough to put a logo to it, which exists today, and that's the name, and it's memorable, and that's what I seek to be.
I love it. And you know what? We won't forget it. That's for sure. And I've seen your logo and I love your logo too.
Thanks.
All right. Well, why don't we get started? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your leadership story or a little bit about the roles maybe you had?
Sure. So, I started out as a very, very technical guy. Among other things, I self-taught myself assembler, which to some people that have been in technology a long time, they'll know what that is. That's a machine language.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I started out really, really technical, and I've always kept learning. But along the way, very early on, I started to actually run some projects. And the minute that you start running projects, you become accountable for delivery of those projects. You're no longer
Hmm.
just a technical resource, you are accountable. And thus, I became a project manager. And I started to understand as I grew and I moved more into leadership. I started to understand what accountability meant. And some of those projects that I had accountability for were pretty visible, like network migrations and
Hmm.
all kinds of crazy things. And I came to understand the difference between management and leadership because they're two very, very different things. Um,
Absolutely.
and what I also saw is as the light bulb went on in my very little head, and I started to see what leadership was about. I also started to understand and see examples of people that were seen as being leaders, but they weren't really effective, or they weren't really using sort of the skills and the abilities that you would expect a leader to
Hmm.
use. Like I remember one of the organizations I worked for, and I was a project manager, a technical project manager. This VP of technology, he actually led by intimidation,
Oh,
and and that yeah, and that
yeah.
was he knew that was his methodology, and he made no apologies for it. But if you looked around you, you got to see how that management by intimidation impacted other people and
Hmm.
impacted the environment. And that's one of those experiences I've never forgotten. Um, but yeah, it just, things like
Hmm.
this really cement in your head what's a manager, what's a leader.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because in my workshop series, I have a whole day or a whole hour where I talk about the differences between
Yeah.
manager and leader because I mean, you can be a manager and a leader, but it's really difficult to do that. And, you have to be a leader, you have to be there for your employees. So, yes, I talk about that as well. Okay, great. So I know that you worked in a very large global organization.
Yep.
So Can you tell us some of the, positive leadership things that maybe that you did see? Because I also worked in a very large global, not as large as where you worked, organization, and
Mhm.
there can be a lot of positive things coming from the top down. So what did you perhaps see?
Yeah, larger companies tend to be better at paying attention to the people they have and the skills those people have. And they tend to be able to recognize that talent and that ability pretty quickly because larger companies have more discipline when it comes to project delivery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they will put opportunities and challenges in front of you, and certainly that's what happened to me. I was at this final company for 18 years before I took retirement, which wasn't exactly my choice,
Oh.
but they did continue to put opportunities and challenges in front of me, and that gave me the ability to have a very unusual and varied career. I stayed technical, but I also stayed close to being
Mm-hmm.
accountable for project delivery because at the end of the day it's in their best interest.
Mm-hmm.
They want to succeed as an organization, so they will be pretty good at recognizing talent and ability pretty early on. And quite frankly, great leaders understand that. Like they understand, they look to identify um, who their people are on
Mm-hmm.
their team, and their team isn't necessarily the individuals reporting to them. It's the individuals that help them to be who they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they get to understand those people, and they get to understand how those people can help to deliver what the company is seeking. The other thing that I saw was that um, larger companies tend to be really good, and this certainly was no exception. They're really good at connecting what the
Mm-hmm.
business wants to technology. Smaller companies tend to just say, "Well, this is the latest and greatest." The internet says that it's the application or the technology that I should have, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to implement it. And then the business struggles.
Mm-hmm.
With larger companies, technology spends a lot of time working with the business, understanding where the business wants to go from a strategic perspective, and then matches the technology to the business, and often even includes business people in the projects that are delivering that technology.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of the things that I saw that I felt were positive from
Yeah.
from a leadership perspective in a large company.
And I would have to agree to your first point as well. I mean, I was lucky enough to become a global quality auditor for our quality program that we had at my company, and
Yep.
also do some of the HR leadership training in North America. So there is opportunity in those large companies, even though we are from Canada and it tends to be smaller here. So yeah, absolutely agree with those. That's wonderful about the tech too, and their positive side of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let me ask you, kind of almost the opposite. What challenges did you see that leadership may have had, which of course that you're able to share with us, that
Yep.
maybe you don't think were handled well? Is there anything that comes up to you today?
Oh yeah, lots. Because nobody's perfect. No organization
Exactly.
is perfect.
Fair enough.
The first thing I saw, and this was unfortunate, was that even at senior levels, like there's emails coming out from human resources that are going out globally to the employees, or from very senior leadership, like
Hmm.
at the C level. They tended to interchange the words management and leadership.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that really bothered. The one thing that's become clear to me is that management is a function, and it focuses on things like processes and
Hmm.
key performance indicators, KPIs, right? And on
Yep.
delivery, on
Tasks.
schedules, that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a very functional practice. Um, and to a certain extent, managers often are trying to maintain the status quo because otherwise they can't measure it. If stuff changes, it's
Hmm.
very difficult to measure. Leadership isn't a function, it's a science.
Hmm.
And it's a very selfless science that involves guiding and motivating others. You can't guide and motivate others if you're fundamentally not a selfless person.
Hmm.
And leaders want to challenge the status quo. Otherwise, you can't build and mold and enable your team. So that's the first thing that I saw that really bothered me was just that interchange between management and leadership,
Hmm. That's a big
in
one.
those communications. Yeah. The second thing, and this, when you really think about it, it's not uncommon in large companies. They want to really focus on the financial state of the company.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that can be a very unhealthy influence on employee morale and productivity.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, I think in a lot of cases, the reason that happens, and I'll be honest, I think in the future we're going to see this become more of an issue, is because large organizations, they have shareholders,
Hmm.
and in most cases, not only do they have shareholders that hold their stock, but they have shareholders that expect an ongoing dividend from the company.
Yes.
And that dividend comes right off the company's bottom line. It's not a factor of the value of the stock. It's a factor of how many shares of the stock you have. And it's a factor of the decisions that the board of directors has made, incrementally quarter over quarter, as
Hmm.
far as what they're going to provide as a dividend to those shareholders. So, those dividends, especially for a company whose stock is kind of languishing, it isn't growing readily, those dividends really become an anchor that
Hmm.
prevents the company from making a lot of really courageous decisions that are innovative.
Hmm.
And to me, that's that all sort of baked together is that whole focus on the financial state of the company, and it really is a drag on the potential for innovation. Um,
Yeah, the creativity too gets missed, right? When you focus so much on finance and on the bottom line, you think sales, 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 cost, 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 and innovation gets put off to the side. Creativity gets put off to the side.
yeah, like I've always believed to a certain extent that in order to make money, you've got to spend money.
Hmm.
Um, and and I've also believed in the ability of people to be creative, to be innovative, to be inventive.
Hmm.
So you want to foster that. You don't want to put, like I said, an anchor on that, a
Yeah.
drag on that. Um, the final thing that I saw, and this was more towards the last few years, with this organization was I saw that they started to embrace agile methodologies.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
as a means to deliver projects. And um, I mean, I'll admit Agile has its place. I'm very familiar with Agile, but I'm also very familiar with project methodologies that are more what we call waterfall.
Hmm.
And both methodologies have their place. But what I saw in terms of leadership issues was I saw that leadership at this organization, senior leadership, looked to Agile as a cure-all. They looked at it as, oh,
Ah.
we can do things faster, and we can be seen by the business as doing more for them and doing it faster. So we should really embrace Agile. And it became very difficult because there's parts of any technology, especially when you're building technology, where you don't have a mature environment.
Hmm.
You can't build a technology environment from scratch in an agile way. It just, there's parts of it you
Hmm.
can, but for the most part you can't. So that was, I saw that as a challenge for leadership. I saw it certainly as something that didn't work well, and I think by the time they got way down the road, it became too difficult to sort of moderate. But
Hmm.
that would be the final thing I would say was just how they embraced agile and that they used it as sort of the silver bullet.
And I would agree with you. It has its place in many places and maybe even pieces of, but you're right, it doesn't always because it is not a cure-all. I 100% agree with you on that one.
Mhm.
So, taking all the positives and what we talked about on the challenges, if you had to put that together, what do you think would be a key quality or a key characteristic that leaders should have?
Great question, and I've always believed that the most fundamental quality that a leader, not a manager, a leader needs to have is courage.
Hmm.
And I call it intellectual courage. I don't call it arrogance. It's not arrogance. It is confidence. but it's
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
confidence in yourself so much as it's confidence in those around you, those that you lead,
Hmm.
that, when they come together, that they can solve, issues that one person can't. On the other hand, because as I've said before, a leader needs to be selfless.
Hmm.
They need to understand that the accountability they have as a leader, is accountability to the team.
Yes.
The team isn't accountable to them; they are accountable to the team. So, they need to understand what that accountability means, and again, they need to be selfless. Um, and just going back to courage for a second, in
Hmm.
that, um, if a leader demonstrates courage, um, especially to the team, then the team picks up on that,
Hmm.
and that helps to drive them. Finally, the last thing I would say a good leader needs to be is a planner. A
Hmm.
leader, I mean, there will be times any leader is thrust into a situation and needs to react immediately, but given the
Yeah.
opportunity, any leader needs to be a good planner. And with practice, you can almost plan anything.
Hmm.
I sometimes say to people, for those that are listening that know what a Gantt chart is, I sometimes say I can
Yes.
build a Gantt chart in my head, as I'm just like we did a Gantt for our wedding, right?
Yes.
It's my natural tendency to want to plan, and what that does is that if you can quickly plan, in most situations, then you can take, the more difficult, the more sudden situations, and you can still plan them. And again, your team picks up on that.
Hmm.
And they have more confidence because they know that you're thinking ahead and that you're thinking of them and that you're not going to leave them in the lurch. It's a
Hmm.
really good quality for a leader to have, is to be a planner.
I love that. When I talk to some of my leadership clients, we talk about risk planning. So
Yes,
think of whatever that worst case scenario is and put some risk plans in place so that if it does happen or you lose that key team member or something, you already have some plans in place to overcome that obstacle. So, yeah, planning,
absolutely.
huge key. I love it. I love it. So you are my first male leadership guest. And again, thanks for
Okay.
that. So now I'm curious, what challenges do you think women face, if any, in your industry when it comes to even just growing up through the ladder of success or to leadership roles?
This is a great question.
Thanks.
Um, and it's a great question, because I think of myself as a humanist, as a moralist. Yeah, I'm male, but I just believe in people generally.
Hmm.
And it's also a great question because through my career, I've had a number of leaders that I worked for that were women, and
Great.
and yeah, and some of
Yeah.
them, um, were very influential in my career. And it's interesting because I think that in many cases, women can make really great leaders because they have a number of ingrained soft skills that just come to them naturally
Hmm.
because of their historical role in a family, right?
Yep.
They're great relationship builders. And they don't tend to be driven so much by ego because, no matter how many centuries of evolution are behind us, the male tends to be more ego driven and tends to be more about defending the family, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, women tend to be, I think, a little bit less driven by ego. There's some that are very driven by ego.
Hmm.
There's no denying that, but they also tend to be more nurturing as a result. And I think that's good because when you think, again, going back to leadership and how selfless it is,
Hmm.
and how courageous, people need to be. I think those are in many cases ideal qualities for a woman. And
Hmm.
I'll be honest, like as I look out, in today's society, I love that there's women coming into non-conventional roles like firefighters. In fact,
Hmm.
even, in our community, I think that we have some lady firefighters on our
Yeah.
volunteer firefighting team. I like that there's women that are fighter pilots. There's even a
Hmm.
woman, who is a pilot with the Blue Angels, which is the
Yes.
Navy. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I love seeing things like that, and like I even remember a time when women were shunned as transit bus drivers. That's no longer the case, but I remember those times. So, I think we've made great strides. I think we
Hmm.
need to make more because, like I said, I think women really do have some of those fundamental soft skills that are just ingrained that makes them great leaders. I believe in
Yeah.
equality, and I think again, look going backwards, I think we just need to be patient and rely on the people that make those decisions about who are going to be the leaders of the future. I think we need to rely on them and sometimes even remind them that they
Hmm.
need to be objective.
Yes, yeah. And I'm an advocate for diversity and equity all over the place. And I come from a very male-dominated industry myself.
Yep.
And I find that it would be fantastic to have diversity at the leadership level so that you have both, as you using your examples, both the ego and the nurturing in one team, because
Hmm.
amazing things can happen if that is there.
Oh,
So, I
yes.
mean, those are amazing examples. So, what would you say for our audience today would be one key takeaway on being a great leader when it comes to a global company?
Um, in a global company, it is going to be a little bit more difficult because there's so many people around you. There's so much inertia around you. But I would I would encourage those that want to be leaders to realize that when they encounter obstacles, they can work with their team to define legitimate and workable solutions to
Hmm.
those challenges, to those obstacles. Um, and remember that you're accountable to the team.
Cool.
But it is the team. Teams can do amazing things, and again, the team isn't just the people that you have some level of control over. On your team can be stakeholders,
Yes.
supporters and advocates. Like in some big projects, it's actually not uncommon, and I've done this myself, to do a stakeholder analysis.
Hmm.
So you understand at the start of the project, who your supporters are, who your advocates are, where your obstacles are, people that may not necessarily agree or understand today with what you want to do, but maybe you can bring them onto your side,
Hmm.
maybe you can't, and there's strategies for that, right? But
Hmm.
fundamentally, when you encounter obstacles, work with your team, solve those obstacles.
I
And
love it.
yeah, and in a large corporation, you'll be seen for that. But realize as well, embracing those obstacles and solving them takes courage. And that's the
Hmm.
biggest thing that a leader needs to have is courage to believe
Yeah.
in what you and your team can do and to have the courage to solve, the challenges that you don't even know of today.
And I like to think of, the including every level of an organization for challenges sometimes can be very important to, making sure the challenge is overcome. Or if you're talking something like safety, that you're ensuring it's not just joint health and safety talking about it. Like, what's the feedback from the people who this may affect? So you're right, like the courage to go out there, the courage to talk to every level. And as you said, others as well. I mean, it could be vendors, customers,
Yep.
stakeholders, whoever, right?
Yeah, because I mean, if I put on my pure project manager hat for a second, I
Hmm.
would say that I can count on less than the fingers of one hand the number of projects that came in on time, on
Yeah.
budget, on scope, and on quality. Like I
Hmm.
think of the project management triangle, but I add that other edge to it, that's the quality edge.
Hmm.
So, if you really soberly realize that there's very few projects that come in exactly the way they were predicted at the start, then you've got to expect the unexpected and you've got to be
Agree.
ready for it, and you've got to embrace your team as the way to face, the unexpected.
Absolutely agree. Awesome. So, thank you for the conversation today, Steve. If someone did want to find out more about Raging Warthog or what your logo looks like, how can they get a hold of you?
So you can email me at Steve at ragingwarthog.com. And yeah, I have sort of an interesting professional career because on one hand, I deliver a number of very large projects for a number
Hmm.
of very large organizations as sort of an independent contractor. On the
Hmm.
other hand, I have some organizations, I do all of their IT support for them. So um, I'm I'm always interested in people wanting to know more about what I do and me being able again as a leader to perhaps influence them and give them some some tools and information and abilities that maybe will help them to be even bigger and better themselves.
That's great. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you.
It's always great chatting with you. Thank you to my listeners. I hope you enjoyed our podcast with Steve today. If you are in need of some leadership coaching, consulting, or workshops, or even want to be a guest on my podcast, then reach out to me at tara@twinlifecoaching.ca. To find out more about all our leadership services, please visit amplifyingleadership.ca, a Twin Life Coaching and Business Services division. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader or leader to be.